Hey folks, LaTonya here. I'm so excited. The registration for Coaching Below the Surface is now open. So you could get more information at changecoaches.io. But just a few things with this program that I'm so excited about. This is going to go so much more beyond DEI. And it's all about coaching and in certain environments, coaching, creating mutual safety. It's ICF approved. It's SHRM approved. You'll get to meet with a cohort of leaders that are like-minded that will stretch you in new ways. So visit our landing page, join our wait list, and there will be a 10% discount for anyone that registers by May 15th. We'll see you there, folks. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Leading Below the Surface podcast. I'm LaTonya Wilkins, your host, author of Leading Below the Surface and award-winning executive coach. And today I am joined here by Austin. I can't wait to talk to Austin. So let me tell you a little bit about Austin Walker and how we met and why I asked him to be on today's podcast. He talks about one of probably the most crucial things in our society today. He has been such an inspiration. It's been such an inspiration to see him grow and find his way as a coach in this niche. And that niche is around coaching men of color around all kinds of stuff. So some of it's around masculinity, toxic masculinity. Some of it's around just general coaching, just general career coaching. He'll tell you about some of that stuff. Some of that's around leadership. But he has been able to create spaces for men which I think are so important right now, especially as we look at the landscape in the United States, especially younger men, how a lot of them are feeling a little lost and they're not having the support systems. A lot of them have been told certain things that aren't really true. And Austin has really been challenging that. And as someone that grew up with men that kind of have those old time beliefs. I love all of you. I wanted to have him on because I really want to spread the word about men as humans and men needing a lot of the same things that stereotypically we think that women need. So Austin, I'm really excited to have you here today. What did I miss in that introduction?
I mean, I don't know if you missed much. What I do notice, there's so much depth in everything that you just shared there. Even that last piece of what you just talked about, like what are men missing and some characteristics that are generally associated with women or the feminine. And the ironic thing around all of this is that all humans, men and women, we're both masculine and feminine.
Yes.
We all have these same needs. Now, it's different transmissions. There's different elements of what I'm going to need as a man or what someone's going to need as a woman, right? And to be able to honor that and step outside of these boxes that I think have been created in society and in culture and getting really connected. What do I need to be the most expressed version of myself? I feel like that's the key. That's what a lot of my work, and it feels like this era that we're in right now, is bringing light to. And all parts of ourselves need to be honored for us to be healthy, functional, reasonable, responsible humans. So, I mean, I appreciate that beautiful introduction, and so much of my work falls on what you just shared. I would say, broad terms, there's this element of masculinity.
Right.
There's a tenet of leadership. There's this tenet of responsibility. You're responsible for all components of how you're showing up in the world. But, and depending on how deep we want to go here today, LaTonya, we'll go there. But I think the overarching, because those things are all great, but it's really predicated along for me and the men that I'm working with in my community is, do you know who you are? Do you know what it means to be you? Do you understand yourself? And then do you know what you're here to do? Because if you can't answer those two questions, I believe that you're aimless, right? You're existing, you're you're living, you're doing things, you're spinning your tires, and there's a huge opportunity, I think, for men and women, but particularly for men, to really ground down and anchor, who are you, right? You have a purpose. You have a mission. There is something that you are here to accomplish. And being clear around who you are and what you're here to do, think drastically changes the tenor of your life and how you use your time and energy.
If you're watching on YouTube, you obviously saw me writing down a bunch of stuff because Austin just came right out the gate dropping some gems. And where I would love to start is what you just said about masculinity and how we both have masculine and feminine. And let's explore this for a bit, because if you are someone that identifies as a woman, this is for you too. This is not just an episode for men and talking about men, because Austin hit a really strong point. So many of you know, I think that I do energy work. And after one of the sessions, my person told me that I channel a lot of the masculine energy, but I need to let that feminine energy in more. And as someone that identifies as a woman, it's interesting because I think it's like those stereotypical things that she was talking about. And so it's like I've been like even little things, and some of you may not be into energy work, but it does come down to the side of it comes down to little things like the side you tend to roll over to, or like I do yoga, and it's how do you do some of your poses, and like what does that look like?
I hear polarity, so the masculine and feminine dynamic, and then energy, which is a really fascinating topic. I myself have been diving more into that, and I believe it's a real thing. And I think I'll start off with this. I think there needs to be an openness around how we understand ourselves, because generally, and this is a generalization, when people hear energy, it's like, oh, woo woo, and
Right.
I'm pure science around it, right? We have an electric magnetic field around us.
When you talked about feelings, let's explore that, because and you're saying I think you're kind of saying not getting too bogged down in those, but acknowledging them. And it's interesting because I teach at Kellogg, and it's interesting because even some of my male students today, they're really comfortable with crying, right? And I think one of the things that you talked about was, talking to men about who you are, what are you here to do, and that could be something that could be very emotional, right? Where you're going inside, and that could provoke tears, or maybe not, right? And some of you may think, why would that provoke tears? Well, because it's very purposeful. It's very, very deep inner work if you do it well, right? And a lot of us don't realize how deep that work is. Yeah, if you're doing it as like a corporate, like performance evaluation, it's going to be very surface. But if you're doing this spiritually, and Austin, I see how you do, it's going to be a different thing. So maybe talk a little bit about what you mean by that. And like, is it okay to cry? How far should feelings go? What can that look like? And especially as that relates to men.
Beautiful question. I'll answer it like this. One of the greatest gifts that the masculine energy, and this doesn't have to be reflected in men per se, but generally more evident in men, is consciousness. And so consciousness means awareness of self, awareness environment, and really not trying to change what is. So as that comes back to, is it okay to cry? It's absolutely okay to cry. If you are recognizing, oh, like I'm having this feeling of sadness, or I have sorrow in my space, and the thing that I need to have this thing move through me so that I'm not bogged down by this, I'm not harboring resentment from this thing, is to express it, right? Then that's a beautiful expression that you get to offer, particularly from from a man. So there's nothing wrong with it. Now we get to look at what stories have we learned about what it means to men to cry. And generally in our communities, as a Black man, I mean, I've seen one Black man cry my entire life. And I remember it so distinctly because it was when that man's father died. It was
even now.
Yeah, she's like, to this day. I mean, in my work now, men are like, will express themselves, but I'm talking like unprompted, just in the flow of life, something happens and they were overcome with emotions and expressed in that particular capacity. For so like not doing work or in a space where, hey, like we're really
just like hanging out in the wild.
Yeah, so like almost like organically in life.
Right.
And it's stuck in my mind because I'd seen so little of that. Because like, so again, there's a story around it. It absolutely is okay. And so when you start to like look at this line of what's too far, I think that's something for every person to be able to determine like what's the right thing for them. And so I would offer it around that if you feel that you are overcome by emotions to the point where it is taking you away from the quality of relationships that you're in, that it is negatively impacting the environments that you're in, or that it is like being a blocker from like ultimately what you're here to do, that's where my signal would be to say, how can I express this or allow this thing to breathe in a way that might be more serving of my mission or the experience that I want? So it's not a good or bad thing. Like I think it is very healthy for men to, if they need to cry, then cry. And like how long and like what is it that you need from crying? Is it just, hey, I need to just have this thing expressed? I actually need somebody else to maybe offer some sort of soothing. So being really clear on like what is the thing that's actually underneath that that's going to have you fulfilled and ready to do whatever it is that you need to, right? Whatever you need.
I don't think we know what we're crying about. Like I went through a recent big life change, and I remember like, and people were like, just cry, just because like if you let yourself express your emotions now, you're going to be much better in the long run. And I think that's very true. Like I found that to be very true. That the more you hold things back, the longer the healing process will be.
Yeah. Blocks energy.
Let's move to your work and tell us about the journey of how you got into this work of coaching of men of color.
We are all a reflection of our environments in some capacity. So one of the big things that's in my space that's reflective of why we created the man cave is it's impossible to normalize or embody something that's not in your environment. So if there is this intention to be this responsible, integrous, open-hearted, fully expressed masculine leader, but if I'm growing up in spaces where I'm not seeing that, how are you supposed to be that? And so in my journey, I mean, I lived a lot of my life up until my 30s, basically doing the things that I thought that I should do. I thought that I should, or it was expected of me, might be a better way to say it, go have a career and, right, make a lot of money in there and being able to provide and essentially have the finances to be able to live the life and whatever you want. So that was my mission. That was the thing that I spent, 10 years, basically from 22 to around 31 of focusing on creating a career for myself. And I share with them there's nothing wrong with that because look, money is a very important tool in today's society. There's nothing wrong with anybody if that is their truth. For me, here's the two things I didn't know. I didn't really know what it meant to be me and what I was here to do. So I didn't know what it meant to be me, nor like what was the thing that my earthly purpose, what was my mission? And doing the work that I was in, government contracting, technology, consulting, that was just something to do. So I highlight that because that's where I find a lot of men and a lot of people, like just take even the men part out of it. They're doing the things that have either been told that they should do, that are expected of them, and they aren't connected. What is true for them? What are they here to do? And if you could own the decision and you're saying, look, I know exactly what I'm here to do and I'm choosing to do this thing, cool. It's an empowered choice. But it's almost like there is this illusion of choice. You think that, oh, well, in my mid-career, I'm making money so I can, live life in this like capitalistic frame, which that's just a reality of it. But if there's not a larger connection to like what the thing that really matters for you, at some point there's going to be a massive reckoning because it's an incongruency. And so for me, that happened in my early 30s, and I had this idea of like, well, like I have all the things I wanted, the job, the location, the lifestyle, and I feel really empty. So that was when I got involved in my therapy and my coaching. And as I deepened into this, as I ultimately started my practice, kind of started off as a generalist, which, probably around the time when we first got connected, LaTonya, and it was supportive, but I noticed that there was a gap in people understanding how do you use any of those modalities to get right for like a larger purpose. Like that was a big missing in my work. And as I looked at myself and my identity, I found that I was going into a lot of spaces that were white normative. And so whether it's at the corporate spaces I was in, whether it's even the wellness and coaching spaces, it is a very white dominated industry.
Mhm.
There are not
Mhm.
a lot of black coaches. There are not a lot of black male
Mhm.
coaches. And so when you're talking about spaces where men can cry, be fully expressed, feel safe to be open and vulnerable. For me, there was a missing in like, there's nobody here who's like me that's holding these
Right.
spaces. And so I'm noticing that I don't feel as safe and I don't feel as comfortable. And even with like, I want that. I had this experience where I was tired of being seen as a unicorn in the spaces that I was in. Oh, look, Austin is a black man who's articulate, who's responsible, who has expressed his feelings, who knows what he's here to doing. For me, that is a reflection of how low the standard of masculinity is right now. For somebody to be like, wow, you're so different. Different compared to what? And so, in order to have, I believe, real change around this, we need to build and uplift communities. And we need to have models of what this is supposed to look like. If you don't know what it's like, what it looks like to emotionally express yourself, to be really clear about what you're here to do, to hold yourself accountable, to keep yourself emotionally regulated, to have productive relationships with other men, then you're not going to do it. Or if you do, it's going to be because you're stumbling into it versus being very intentional and purposefully creating that in your environments. So the man cave was born from that, from an intention of we want to create a safe space for men of color to be fully expressed, who are committed to their growth journey, to self-actualization, to serving their mission, to being responsible, integrous, and open-hearted leaders. And so we've created a container where we meet virtually. We connect every week on intentional conversations on a variety of different elements of masculinity, of leadership, of life.
What would you say are maybe the top three challenges of these men in the man cave that make them unique? Because I know you've coached other people. I mean, because we've done some work together. But like with this particular group, like what would you say are some of the things that these men are really struggling with?
The first one I'd say is there's some sort of an avoidance. So there's some sort of avoidance of what is uncomfortable. So that could be conflict, that could be a not knowing, that could be this perception of where men should be. So you could even tie awareness to not being able to acknowledge what is. So if we can't be real, LaTonya, around this is what the state of my bank account looks like right now, just something that's very black and white. And, oh, well, because I'm here, this means I need to do XYZ things. If I'm looking at it like, oh, hey, I'm great, even though it's my bank account ain't showing that, like we're not dealing with reality here. So that would be number one. Number two, some element or flavor of limiting beliefs. So it could be I'm not enough, right? I'm not valuable. I need to perform as to be valuable. It's probably one of the number one things that I'm seeing from a lot of men. This idea of I constantly have to show up. And then I would say, let's see, a last one is a general unawareness. And so what this means specifically, an unawareness, particularly around defensiveness.
Hmm.
So men are saying, hey, like, I'm not defensive. And then when they get challenged, particularly by the feminine in their lives, they're showing up very defensive, or they're showing up very closed, or they're stonewalling because of some sort of emotional need that isn't being met, but they're not aware that they're doing this thing. So they're just showing up in this conversation like this.
Mm. Hmm.
Look,
Hmm.
and they're not, so they don't recognize what's going on in their space, what emotions they're feeling, how to effectively communicate what they're
Hmm.
feeling and what they need. For me, some of this sounds like pretty rudimentary, but if you can't do some of these foundational things, and look, this is a wide variety of men. I mean, we have men who are C-level executives in corporate, which a lot of people would say, oh yeah, like really successful people who have very poor emotional regulation skills, who have a very poor ability to be able to communicate what they need, or even have a disempowered story that it is not okay to make a request around what they need. And so those are a number of the things that we notice for men in the man cave at varying degrees. And a lot of our content and a lot of the like our structure and the things that we're talking about is one, to normalize and to bring awareness to these things. Because again, if we're not aware that these things are happening, we can intentionally address or make the choices that are needed to show up differently. And empowering the men with this awareness, who do you want to be? And practice this.
Yeah, there's a couple things that you said that kind of hit. And one, as I was hearing, I was like, okay, the first two, I was like, all right, this sounds like it's not different across genders, right? But the third one you mentioned, you talked about not being aware and stonewalling. And I'm sure you're familiar. Are you familiar with Gottman? He does a lot of couples therapy, couples stuff.
Right.
And it's very heteronormative. So, I mean, but some of it's good. Some of it's interesting. But one of the things, like one of my really good friends, he's an older male, and he talks about he mentors a lot of younger men, and he talks about Gottman a lot because he says that these young men tend to stonewall in their relationships. And you mentioned that now, so maybe we could talk about what is that? What is stonewalling, and how do you know that you're doing it?
As I relate to stonewalling, it's really shutting off emotionally. So you might be you might be listening to somebody, but you're not hearing them. You are not expressing it and sharing really what what your truth is. So that could be the thoughts that are in your mind, the what emotions that you're feeling, what you need. It's almost as if another parallel. I'm an analogy person. It's like you're showing up in a conversation, but you're an empty vessel. You're not really there. Okay, and so when that happens, essentially intimacy is impossible in those states because one person is open and one person has essentially put up a wall or is closed in so they can't connect with somebody emotionally. And particularly in our intimate relationships, if we're not connecting emotionally, then I mean we're not connected, period. And then so how you recognize that you're doing this is a practice of awareness. And so we got to start understanding in these moments, what are some of the leading indicators that show that lead to stonewalling? So generally it is I'm in an uncomfortable situation because there would be no reason to stonewall if I was comfortable. So this could be a perceived attack. This could be criticism, right? And that's why a lot of these things, particularly for men and women dynamics and romantic relationships, especially a lot of men, if they feel like they're being critiqued, even if it's rightfully so from their partners, it can flare up again, a limiting belief of, oh, I'm not enough. And then starts catastrophizing. Well, if I'm enough, then my partner's going to leave me and I'm not going to be enough. And then so as a protection mechanism, we close up.
Mm-hmm.
And so it requires truly being aware of what is going on in your body. Noticing, hey, I'm noticing that I'm starting to get a little anxious here. I'm starting to get sad, starting to get flustered. And then being able to, even just for men, like the level one is being able to name what those things are. Because a lot of men get overwhelmed with emotion. And so it's like they're having all these experiences and they can't sit and say, oh, wait, this is sadness. This is anger. I have a little bit of resentment here, right? And so once you can name what's happening for you, you get to then have a conversation around what do you need around those things. And so there's a number of different strategies that we talk about. I think one universal that everybody can implement, and it's one of the ones when you hear it, people are like, okay. And but then when they practice it, it transforms how they regulate themselves is the connection to their breath.
And that connection can also help you know when that's happening, right?
And I would say, and this is a little bit more in relational dynamics, but I think in really great partnership, you can hopefully you're building a relationship where you trust if your partner is giving you a reflection that you're not taking that as criticism, but you're looking at it particularly from the masculine into the feminine. The feminine complaint is generally reflection of some way that they're not feeling the masculine. And so a lot of men take complaints and say, oh, it's attack, or they try and justify or defend as opposed to saying, oh, wait, there's some element that my partner's not feeling me. And to understand what's happening. So separating myself from right the behavior that's being talked about here. I am not this behavior. And if you think that you're some negative behavior, that's generally going to make you defensive, right? And being able to look at that outside of you and then be in conversation and partnership around that. I mean, ultimately, that's what we're supporting men to be able to do more reliably and consistently. And so you can probably hear a number of different things in that. It's regulating your emotions, is being able to communicate your emotions, It's being able to ultimately stay regulated. And you have to be able to practice that. And that's going to be vary based off of like where you're at and what your capacity is and awareness for what's going on in your body.
Well, that's why they have the man cave, because that takes a lot of practice, right? It's understanding when you're having these behaviors come up and navigating those behaviors, being aware of them, because that served you, right? It served you in some way. It's protected you. Whether it's real or false, that's fine. But it's just protected you in some way.
You hit the nail on that. Because look, all of these behaviors are survival mechanisms.
Right,
The
right,
body
right,
is doing it because
right,
we are perceiving some sort of
right.
danger. And right, a lot of this goes back into early childhood, right? What did we learn from our parents? What did we learn from the people around us? Maybe even some specific traumas that we may have had. So it feels like a lot of this is both learning how to regulate and then both unlearning patterns and behaviors that aren't serving, that aren't needed. Like we're having reactions as opposed to intentional responses. And the work is to be able to intentionally respond. And it's edgy, right? Because look, we're all humans. Like we said earlier with this polarity, we're all going to feel things. We're all going to have moments of when we're triggered. And the key is when we're triggered, it's impossible. It's very, very, very difficult to be responsible when you're triggered. So it is, how do I manage and grow my awareness as to what are the things that lead to that? How can I regulate myself so I expand that capacity? I can stay with uncomfort longer, or I can communicate my needs effectively to say, hey, LaTonya, this is a great conversation, but I need 5, right? To regulate myself. And then I can come back, right? There's so many tools that are out there, but the blocking and tackling of this is knowing what's going on and then being able to effectively communicate that.
Yeah, this is so great. This is such a good conversation. And I know we don't have a ton of time, but I want to get into maybe our final topic today, and that's you said a couple things with men, and again, I think these are kind of gender neutral things, but I think they manifest in different ways. But I'm not enough, and it's so interesting that you say that about men, because women, everybody feels that way. And what I'm starting to hear and like from you and sense coming from you, or intuit coming from you, I should say, is that this comes out differently for men. So there's probably different pressures of I'm not enough. And I mean, are these still kind of these antiquated type of, I would say, expectations on men, that you have to have more money, that you can't take care of children, that that you can't, that you have to make a certain amount of money, like to be a real man? Is this still something out there? Because with women, I think it's opposite. Like, oh my gosh, I have to be a good mother. I mean, if you are a mother, or I have to, I have to do everything right. I have to do everything better than men. Like, so what is that? Is that true? Is that still something going on in our society?
Very nuanced and great question. So here's how I'll best answer that. So I absolutely do think it is going on in our society. And this is where it comes down to, I think each man really needs to determine like what enough is for them. And if you're holding yourself to a standard that is outside of you, external, then you're always going to be chasing something. So that's number one. But it's tricky because that's invisible. And people just go based off of, oh, well, this is what my dad said. This is what a man looks like. These are what the other men that I see looks like. That means this is what success looks like. And so all of this, even if you take it back to my personal story, you're learning what success or what good looks like from something other than what you have chosen. And I think that's really important. Now, around this, I think a lot of men do, because again, we are even for me in a Western society, or we are a capitalistic society, there's a lot of performance that is generally expected of men. So that could be in how we provide. Even historically, if we go back to our tribal days, it was men's expectations in hunter and gathering to be able to go bring in food. And so if you can't bring in food, you kind of are perceived as like less valuable. So I think it's for each man to determine what this looks like for them, right? You are inherently valuable. And so, like, if you don't believe that you're inherently valuable from the beginning, and this has to be reinforced from a number of different ways, then I think this is going to manifest in some other different ways. What I think would be helpful around this conversation is to talk maybe about some specific areas that this comes around, because this comes up a lot within the man cave. So I think let's just do money and sex, because those are two easy ones.
Oh no, we're going to talk about sex, folks. Okay.
Yeah. Well, so money, there's this idea in a
It's
lot of
still, as long as we keep it
yeah,
PG,
we'll
because
keep it PG. We'll
my
keep it PG.
podcast goes in another
Yeah.
rating. It's
Yeah,
okay.
well, PG. I mean, well, sex is a thing, and that's one of the
Yeah,
biggest
yeah, yeah.
needs for humans.
I'm just messing with you.
There,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so money, there's generally this standard. I have to make X amount. If a man thinks that he is less valuable because he doesn't make some arbitrary amount, right, and then relate himself as less valuable and allows other people to treat him less than valuable because of that, right? That's, I think, where the issue is. Because it's like, I mean, money comes and goes, right? It flows. And so if you are justifying your value based off of some external circumstance, that's a losing formula, right? And so it's being able to communicate, it's being able to recognize, oh, well, if I didn't make this much money, what are the things that I need to do? How much do I actually need? So when we can step out of the story and just get real clear about what are the facts around this, have I attracted a partner in a community that is gonna hold me to some standard that I haven't set for myself? So if I and so you see this a lot in dating, particularly not as much, I would say, in my experience, in marriages and long-term relationships, but in more of the general early dating market, where there's these perception, oh, if you don't make six figures, then I'm interested in you. For me, that is a reflection of, well, what are the values of this person? That value actually may not be reflective to the thing that I'm looking for, or there's a limited element there. So we get to control and own that. And then, like, on the sex perspective, I mean, if you even think about what sex has been oriented around, a lot of it has been oriented around male pleasure. And so a lot of
Oh yes. Okay. This is yeah, I'm into this topic.
it
Yes.
totally is, right? There's
Yes.
very little. I
Yes.
mean, if you look at a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
men's first experience with sex is
Yeah.
porn, right? Which is
Yeah.
the most
Yeah.
toxic
Right.
experience, because porn is, and I'll say in my experience, is nothing like what the intention of what lovemaking or sexual connection or intimacy is, has the possibility to be. If you're comparing yourself, right, to these images of what you've learned without really understanding of what this thing is supposed to feel like, right? How do you actually have connection, right? How are you supposed to do all of these things? There's a massive incongruency. And then so you're making yourself wrong based off of a criteria that doesn't exist. It would be another equivalent of maybe like a woman holding herself accountable from a beauty standard to a picture on a magazine that's been edited and photoshopped and all the like, that's actually not real, but you're holding yourself to that standard. And so, again, the great masculine gift is awareness and consciousness. So, if you can even share and being able to say, hey, this is how it is that I have sex, right? Right. And this is actually what I'm trying to do, and like step outside of the stories of it, you can create anything that you want. But when we're in these stories, oh, well, because, right, I'm not having sex like this porn star, right? Then now I'm inherently bad. And my woman thing, it's snowball in some really destructive ways. So I think those two examples, those that we've talked about into the space, and a lot of this is deconstructing disempowered stories and getting connected to what is the truth of each man, and understanding that they are valuable in whatever criteria that is based off of the criteria that they set. And then here's the last part. Then they are holding themselves accountable to that standard. And they are in action to creating whatever that desired experience is. Because if you say, hey, like I want to make six figures, but then you're not doing anything to make six figures, well, now you're incongruent. And then that is the thing that is untrustable or less trustable out rather than how much money you are making or you are not. Also, I mean, you can just boil this down to who you say that you are, and are your actions like aligned with that vision? And when they are, right, people will be with just about anything and we can adjust and we'll adapt. But when they're not, and a lot of people they're not, and they don't know that they're not, is when issues arise.
You are obviously a coach, you are mentally healthy, you are all these things. Um, I want to hear how you would respond to the statement that all men are, well, most straight men um, are closet sexists, and they really respect old behaviors of women and they still want that. And the reason why I'm asking this, I know it's very provocative, is because of the environment we're in right now. Like in the United States, there has been this onslaught of men in power that are saying these things. And actually, in my coaching conversations with women or even friends, like when this all was happening, they were like, wow, like, I don't even know if I trust what men are saying. Cause it's like, they're saying that they're changing, but then this happened. And so what are they all secretly thinking? And they were secretly thinking things that they weren't telling us because when they voted, it was different. So how would you respond to that?
When I hear that, I kind of go back into, so the premise of this is that men are closet sexist and they kind of secretly want.
Yeah, they secretly want all that. They secretly want the woman to stay home. They secretly want to be the dominant gender in society. They secretly want to call the shots. Like they secretly, like you brought up sex. They secretly want women just to give them pleasure, right?
Well, if we go in natural order, and so I think part of what's wrong around this argument is that one is better than the other, right?
Yes, I agree.
I agree. Well, like even saying like, "Hey, I'm dominant," is insinuating that I am above this.
Right.
So how I look at it, ultimately, it's a masculine and feminine, men and women. It's a yin and a yang. They both have different things, and they both are needed. That's not to say that they are equal, right? Because there's differences around that, but they have different functions. So when you say historically masculine is more around building, is around expansion, is around doing, whereas women and the feminine has generally been more nurturing. And if there is a story that like nurturing is less valuable than building and expanding, then we're inherently going to be off and around this. So I think if we just go back to like natural order, even humans in the animal kingdom, right? Like I think that's a universal truth and around it. So for men to say, hey, do I want some of these elements of like the old way or how it needs to be? I don't think they're necessarily wrong in for that. I think in your experience, well, then what are you going to do to create that in a positive and a healthy way? Right? I mean, there are some men that I know that saying, "Hey, look, based off of like my appetite and that I want, like I desire multiple sexual partners, right? Even in
Mm-hmm.
a committed relationship. And I create the dynamics of my relationship, right, to understand that." I would say that's probably a little bit more on the extreme end. So I think all of these things can exist, but if men and women are in partnership and actually working together, right? I'll give you this. This is the provocative statement. I think most women would be willing to give men exactly what they want, right? If men showed up trustable, clear, and made very clear demands around what they need and how that was going to work and serve the feminine in their lives. Just like most men, if there was something that their women's I need this thing, most men who are gonna lock in and do exactly what they need around that. Oh, yeah, and this, I mean, it's nuanced, but I think it goes back down to partnership and go back to, right, like natural order. They're both valuable, and it's like, how do we relate to that?
Yeah, and one of the things you said early on was not necessarily equal, and and some people may listen to that and think, "Oh my gosh, what do you mean by that?" But what I hear is that it could fluctuate, like where the woman has more power, and like, or whatever gender. I mean, if you don't have gender, whatever, but like the partner, that's what I see is like, um, you know, it fluctuates at different times and different people, especially in my friends that are in heterosexual marriages, relationships. It's like they go through waves, right? and it's not necessarily equal all the time.
Precisely. Just like the standard isn't most men do caring for child caring, like our biology hasn't been set for that. Like men have our more muscles, bigger bone density, right? Generally for like hunting and gathering and things like that. Whereas even just like the chemicals that are in the feminine is more set for nurturing. So just to like, if we flipped it, if like men did all the like, let's say familial nurturing, child caring, and women were doing the building, that just like wouldn't make sense based off of our biology. Right. And so not to say that it can't, but if we just go back to simplify things and going back to natural order, right? And not just humans, but in the animal kingdom, I think there's just a lot of truths that kind of curb a lot of.
Yeah. Well, I think nurture, like what you said, it could be like, I think now those roles can be more fluid. Like, and there are men that, like, I know some of these men that they want to be home with the kids and that's all they want to do. And so I think it's just like what you're saying. I agree there has been a natural order, but it's like, I wonder if that's evolving, like as people, there's the biology, but there's also the nurturing and the way people are raised. And if they're raised in a way where that's okay to be more nurturing, then they might be. And some may not. It just depends on the person, right?
Totally. Which again, back down to who you are, right? What you're here to do. And what does that look like within your family, within your relationship? Like all of this is really deeply personal, although I know there's some general themes around this. And I think if you're willing to choose, right, then you get to have your lived experience reflective of what you actually want, not the thing that you are told or expected that it should be.
I could continue this conversation forever, but we have to go. But Austin, how can people find you?
People can find me on Instagram at I am Coach Austin Walker. I post a lot of my own podcast and my reels on Instagram, so that's a great way to connect. You can fill out the interest form, which is available on my Instagram or my website at www.austinwalkercoaching.com. So if you're interested in working with me personally, you can find the interest form on my website. Or if you're interested in dropping into the man cave and being in a community of other like-minded men of color who are committed to doing the work, you can fill out the interest form on my website or my bio.
And folks, we'll leave all that information in the show notes. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll definitely see you next time.